I don't mean that poetically. I mean the walls around me moved, slow and rhythmic, like something alive pretending to be stone. Crystalline light refracted in impossible colors, bouncing off jagged gemstones embedded in the rock. Amethyst, opal, quartz. They pulsed softly, humming through my bones. And wrapped around my wrists, gently, unmistakably, were the tendrils. Okay, I whispered, my voice echoing strangely. This is not part of the tour. The tentacle-like strands weren't slimy or aggressive like every horror movie had trained me to expect. They were smooth, warm, almost protective, guiding rather than trapping. When I pulled back, they loosened. When I froze, they tightened, like they were responding to my fear. That was when the glow started. It spread from where the tendrils touched my skin, a cool shimmer crawling up my arms, across my chest, down my spine. I gasped as the cave light flared brighter, and caught my reflection in a mirror-smooth gemstone wall. The face staring back at me wasn't wrong. But it wasn't mine anymore. My features were softer, cheekbones catching the light, lips fuller, eyes wide and luminous like polished gems. My hair had lengthened, spilling over my shoulders in glossy waves that reflected blues and violets from the cave. No, I breathed. No, no, no. Yet even as panic surged, another feeling rose beneath it, quiet, dangerous curiosity. Because the person in the stone wasn't afraid. She looked awake. Before the cave, my life had been painfully ordinary. I worked a job that barely noticed me, wore clothes that felt more like armor than expression, and lived inside expectations I never consciously chose. People saw what they expected to see, and I learned early not to challenge that. So when I signed up for a guided spelunking trip, just to feel something different, I didn't expect the earth itself to answer me. The guide lost me when a minor collapse sealed off one tunnel and forced me deeper into another. My flashlight flickered, then died, leaving me surrounded by gemstone glow and that low, resonant hum. That was when the cave responded. The tendrils emerged from the walls like living crystal vines, curling around my ankles, my waist, my arms. Not threatening, inviting. The light intensified, and warmth spread through me, reshaping me cell by cell, breath by breath. When I finally stumbled back into daylight hours later, the world felt louder. Sharper. And I felt different. The first real shock came at home. I locked my door, leaned against it, and slid to the floor, heart racing. My clothes didn't sit right anymore, too stiff, too boxy. When I stood and caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, my knees nearly buckled. My body had changed subtly but undeniably. Narrower waist. Wider hips. My posture had shifted, balance recalibrated like my center had moved. The gemstone shimmer wasn't visible anymore, but it felt embedded under my skin, like a secret only I could feel. I pressed my hands to my face. What happened to me? My phone buzzed with messages from work. I ignored them. For once, I didn't have the energy to explain myself to a world that barely listened. The next day, going outside felt like stepping onto another planet. People stared, not openly, but enough. A double take. A lingering glance. Whispers that followed me like static. At the cafe, the barista smiled warmly. What can I get you? I hesitated. My voice came out lighter, smoother than I remembered. Coffee. Please. Her smile didn't change. Of course. That small normalcy nearly made me cry. At work, though, the tension was unavoidable. My manager blinked when she saw me, eyes scanning like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Everything okay? She asked. Yes, I said. Then, after a beat, I think so. I wasn't lying. I was just unfinished. That night, alone, I finally stopped pretending this wasn't happening. I stood in front of my closet, heart pounding, and pulled out clothes I'd never worn outside. Softer fabrics. Flowing shapes. Things I'd bought and hidden, telling myself they were just curiosities. When I slipped on a loose, gem-toned top, the fabric settled against me like it belonged there. I turned slowly, watching how it moved with my body, how my reflection aligned in a way it never had before. I laughed, soft, breathless. Oh. Makeup came next. Tentative at first. A brush across my cheekbones. Color on my lips. My hands shook, but with each small adjustment, the reflection grew clearer. Not perfect, but honest. I practiced speaking, walking, standing without hunching my shoulders. Each movement felt like unlocking something long dormant. The cave hadn't changed me randomly. It had revealed me, polished me like a gemstone hidden under pressure for years. In the quiet, I remembered the way the tendrils had responded to fear, to stillness. Maybe this was the same. The weekend tested me. I chose a simple outfit, nothing flashy. Neutral colors, clean lines. I stepped out into the world with my heart in my throat. At the park, sunlight caught my hair, making it gleam faintly. A woman jogging past smiled and said, "Love your outfit." I barely managed to thank you before she was gone, but the warmth lingered. At a bookstore, an employee struck up a conversation about fantasy novels. She never questioned who I was, only what I liked. Each interaction stitched my confidence together, thread by careful thread. Still, anxiety hovered. I jumped at sudden noises, braced for ridicule that never quite came. The real confrontation arrived at work, during a team meeting I couldn't avoid. Someone finally asked it, the question hovering in the air for days. "So, what's going on with you?" The room went silent. My heart hammered. I could retreat, deflect, make a joke. Instead, I breathed. "I'm figuring myself out," I said. "And I'm not done." The silence stretched, then someone nodded. Another smiled. The world didn't end. Weeks passed. The cave stayed with me, not physically, but in sensation. Sometimes, when I stood still, I could almost feel the tendrils again, steadying me, reminding me to listen inward instead of outward. I joined a small creative group. Met people who spoke openly about identity, change, becoming. They didn't flinch at my story. One of them said, "Sounds like the cave just accelerated what was already there." Maybe that was true. The final test came when the cave called to me again. Not literally, but in dreams. Crystalline light. A sense of invitation. I returned to the site alone, heart steady this time. I didn't enter the cave again. I didn't need to. Standing at the entrance, I placed my hand on the cool stone. "Thank you," I whispered. The gems glowed once, soft, approving, and dimmed. Now, when I look in the mirror, I don't search for what I lost. I see what I uncovered. I dress with intention. Speak with confidence. Walk like I belong wherever I stand. Not because a cave changed me, but because it gave me permission to stop hiding. If you're listening to this, feeling pressure building inside you like something waiting to crack open, hear this. I thought leaving the cave behind would quiet everything. Instead, it followed me. Not in a frightening way, no glowing walls or reaching tendrils, but in the way my body remembered. Every morning when I woke up, there was a brief moment of weightlessness, like I'd just shed a shell in my sleep. My skin felt sensitive to light, to texture, to emotion. Colors seemed brighter. Sounds carried deeper meaning. Even silence felt loud. And then there was the mirror. I didn't avoid it anymore. I stood in front of it deliberately now, studying the subtle details that continued to evolve. My waist curved more naturally. My shoulders had relaxed into a softer slope. My face, still mine, carried an openness I'd never seen before, like I was no longer bracing for impact. "What are you becoming?" I asked softly. The reflection didn't answer, but she didn't look confused either. The world began responding differently too. At work, people adjusted without announcing it. A coworker complimented my earrings one morning like it was the most normal thing in the world. Another asked if I wanted to join them for lunch, something that had never happened before. During that lunch, someone joked, "You seem happier lately." I froze for half a second, then nodded. "I think I am." And that was the truth that scared me most. Happiness felt unfamiliar. Like wearing a size I'd never tried before, comfortable, but suspiciously so. Not everyone was smooth about it. One afternoon, a colleague pulled me aside and asked, "So, is this a phase?" I smiled politely, even though my chest tightened. "It's a process." They didn't know what to say after that. I was learning that I didn't owe anyone a clearer answer. At home, my private exploration deepened. I rearranged my space, softer lighting, gemstone-colored throws, fabrics that felt good against my skin. I painted my nails one evening, choosing a translucent shade that caught the light just enough to notice. Watching my hands move afterward felt strangely grounding, like I was finally inhabiting them fully. I practiced my voice, not changing it drastically, just letting it rise and fall naturally. Letting emotion color it. Letting pauses exist. The more I allowed myself to feel, the more I sensed the cave's logic behind everything. Transformation wasn't force. It was permission. The first real test came on a Friday night. A friend from before, texted me. Haven't seen you in forever. Drinks? My stomach flipped. I almost said no. Almost stayed safe in my carefully curated bubble. But something inside me, the same quiet pull I'd felt when the tendrils first wrapped around my wrists, nudged me forward. Okay, I typed. But I might look a little different. The bar was loud, dimly lit, familiar in all the wrong ways. When I walked in, he stared for a full 3 seconds before speaking. Wow, he finally said. You look different. I held his gaze. Yeah. An awkward pause stretched between us. Then he shrugged. You seem more comfortable, though. That surprised me. As the night went on, the tension eased. We talked. We laughed. He stumbled once or twice with pronouns, then corrected himself without making a big deal out of it. At one point, he leaned back and said, You know, I don't totally get it. But I'm glad you're not miserable anymore. That was enough. Walking home later, the city lights reflected off windows like scattered gemstones, and for the first time, I felt like I was part of the scene instead of passing through it. The dreams returned that night. I was back in the cave, but this time, I wasn't lost. I stood in the center, calm, as the tentacles rose slowly from the walls. They didn't bind me. They circled me, orbiting like curious planets. When they touched me, it wasn't to change my body, but to steady it. You are allowed to stop resisting, a feeling, not a voice, seemed to say. I woke up with tears on my cheeks and a strange sense of relief. The climax came unexpectedly, during a presentation at work. I stood in front of a room full of people, hands lightly shaking, slides glowing behind me. Halfway through, I felt that old instinct flare, the urge to shrink, to rush, to disappear. Instead, I paused. I breathed. I felt my feet on the floor. My body, this body, solid, present, mine. And I continued. When I finished, the room was quiet for a beat, then filled with applause. Not thunderous. Not dramatic. Genuine. Afterward, my manager said, That was the most confident I've ever seen you. I smiled. I'm finally not fighting myself. That was the moment I understood the transformation wasn't ongoing because it had to be. It was ongoing because I was finally cooperating. Now, when I think about the cave, I don't think about danger or fear. I think about pressure. About time. About how gemstones are formed, not by avoiding darkness, but by enduring it long enough to crystallize into something strong and luminous. If you're listening to this and you feel that same pressure inside you, like something is waiting to emerge, please hear me. You don't have to rush. You don't have to explain everything.